Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. The man who solved Kirk Cousins' play action is now a Minnesota Viking.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and my bonuses are not likely to be earned.
I'm Arif Hasan at Pro Football Network, live on location, in undisclosed location.
Not this undisclosed stuff again. It's the Minnesota football party. Let's do it.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hasan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome in. Happy Monday. It's the Minnesota football party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. I am Sam Ekstrom. That's Arif Hasan. That's Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. So much to get to on today's show, including Dean Lowry signing with the Minnesota Vikings. What exactly is going on with Za'Darius Smith and Dalvin Cook? We're in a holding pattern right now with that news. And Adam Thielen has a new home. Plus, has the Vikings defense gotten better or worse in free agency? All of that and plenty more on today's Minnesota football party, which you can find as part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota family, which is available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Just subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota to get all of our videos, all of our shows, including Ron Johnson and Minnesota Sports Rank 'em. Gentlemen, before we get to our first topic today, we are brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Check out FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. Where should we begin? How about the question that everybody is asking, Arif and Luke? What's up with Za'Darius? What's up with Dalvin? These are the two names that we've had circled. We waited for the Friday news dump. We said, well, the Vikings always do this. They drop the bad news on Fridays. Za'Darius has these guarantees that are kicking in today. Today's the day. Radio silence. We hear nothing. Dean Lowry signed. That was something. The Vikings added money to their books, but they did not make the move that we all expected. So Braun, let's start with you. Translate for us. Za'Darius remains a Viking. Dalvin remains a Viking. What's up?
Yeah, so Friday it was, right? Was the day that a bunch of money locked in for Za'Darius Smith just became guaranteed salary, which doesn't preclude any options. The Vikings technically could still cut Za'Darius Smith, but if they were going to, you would think that if it was hey, we'll get a new extension done or we'll cut you, you would probably want to resolve that one way or another before that deadline, because now cutting him is that much less efficient. It also, it like slightly changes trade negotiations, maybe in favor of the Vikings, because now teams can't come and say, well, we're not going to pay you any draft picks. You might just cut them anyways. Well, now that's less likely. So that leverage kind of is changed a little bit. But on the other hand, you're trading a contract with more guaranteed salary. So it just kind of changes stuff. But I would say Za'Darius Smith getting cut is just like a good bit less likely. And trading him and or working out something that he's a little bit more satisfied with are both much more likely options. The thing about this is it doesn't really have to be urgently resolved until that extension, like they need whatever 2023 cap space that extension would create, if it even would create any. Maybe they give him like a pay raise and maybe it costs more money, and that's something you can kind of handle. You can do that in June if you wanted to. So I don't know if that's like an urgent matter. And then with Dalvin Cook, I wonder if there is a holdup with him like recovering from that shoulder surgery with a trade. Maybe teams want him to be a little healthier before they actually process that. But that's a total wild guess. I don't know what the holdup with that is, or maybe everybody's just waiting for the draft. There's a lot of good running backs in the draft who would trade for Dalvin Cook when you can get somebody that you like plenty in the 4th round of the draft, right? And then maybe a team strikes out there, and then we process a trade like this again in June. Those are, I guess, my guesses for what the holdup on stuff is. But the Vikings do have to make more cap space just to process everything that they've announced, everything that's been reported. If you tally it all up with pay cuts and all of that stuff, they are 2 to 3 million, depending on some little contract details that we don't have, 2 to 3 million over if they process everything, which they haven't yet, and they won't be able to until they clear other cap space. So like something's got to give here.
Yeah, no doubt. It always felt to me like it was a trade that was going to be the end of Za'Darius Smith. I think the Vikings would probably assume that there's some value in an asset like that to get something back. It's not a post June 1 thing. The post June 1 is it's a negligible difference. They're not going to make him a camp cut. They're not going to bring him in to do that charade. So I think that they're probably waiting for whatever to formulate on the trade market comes together. Arif, do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, I think that the idea that the guaranteed locking in, I thought that was kind of broken from the start. The idea that would create a deadline on the Za'Darius Smith trade. I will say one thing to kind of keep in mind is that, from my understanding, the guarantee that locks in is essentially a roster bonus. So it doesn't get paid out right away, which means that a structure change in his contract, which converts maybe a roster bonus to a signing guarantee, is still, or a signing bonus, is still absolutely on the table as a means of both providing him more cash up front and reducing the amount of cap hit this year, right? And so the fact that it hasn't been paid out, in fact, I actually don't think from an accounting perspective it matters whether the money is physically in his bank account, but the fact that it is locked in as guaranteed doesn't change your capacity to convert guarantees into signing bonus, right? And so it is still as possible as before to restructure. It's just the nature of the options available to you. Those options have narrowed, but I don't think they would have substantially changed from if they wanted to change, a way that they would restructure him, right? And so the only thing is, obviously, if they restructure him, it is pretty untenable to trade him, because then you take a dead money hit, essentially, if you extend him with a signing bonus and then trade him. But trading is still on the block. I think that you probably have to ask for a little bit more because you're taking on more guaranteed money, but trading is still on the block. Restructuring is still on the block. I kind of we don't have a real reason why he wanted to be released, right? Like we didn't get that, right?
He wanted to play the market, according to Darren Wolfson.
Okay.
Which makes sense. He's got not that much money and none of it's guaranteed. So,
I mean, I don't want to be anti-labor or anything like that, but he did kind of sign up for this, right?
He's had to sign the prove it deal.
Yeah,
he had to sign the prove it deal because of his back. He played all the games, he hit all his incentives, and I think he wanted to go back to the table. And I think he just assumed that the Vikings wouldn't want to, and the Vikings were like, "Wait, no, we're cool with that. Let's talk later."
Right? Yeah. My guess is that he's going to get his money this year somehow. So that's not a concern to me. The Dalvin Cook thing, it would not shock me if that happened during or after the draft. I mean, sometimes these just happen during and after the draft.
Interesting. Is it possible that with all the noise around Za'Darius, that it's all been a red herring, and the guy we should really be looking at is Danielle Hunter? Because Danielle Hunter is in just as precarious a spot contractually. He's certainly
such an awkward contract to trade. You have to post unit, and you take a lot of dead money, and the only reason you post unit is to split that money up so that Danielle Hunter doesn't become more expensive in 2023.
And if you post unit, the cap space you clear from post unit, it doesn't actually arrive until June 1st.
Yeah,
so it's tough to work with.
And the rest of it hits
you probably so you're probably trading with the team that would be interested in extension. Does that alleviate some of the untradeability of that contract?
No,
not
because
for
the team has to commit. Not for you. The team still has to commit money to it, so it's going to make it difficult for you to demand as much in a trade if it is understood that there's an extension. I mean, that's one of the reasons that some of these trades that we've seen, like the Jalen Ramsey trade, for example, went for so little, because there's an expectation that new money coming in from the trading team, the team that acquires, is going to limit the value of the asset essentially that you're acquiring. In this case, the asset's the contract, but yeah.
And with a contract like Hunter's, like from the Vikings side, they have to go to a team and say, well, we're going to take a bunch of dead money if we do this. And you're getting Danielle Hunter at 4.9 mil. We need more because of that. We need more compensation. And then the other team will say, well, we need to give them whole contract. So we need to give you less because of that. And that just like widens the gap between teams making an agreement and makes it that much harder to come to one.
It's all very interesting. As it stands now, the Vikings have a lot of big name players on their defensive line. And I don't know if Dean Lowry is a big name player, but they added a piece from Green Bay, a guy who's logged a lot of mileage for not being spectacular as a player. 4,000 snaps with the Green Bay Packers. I mean, he's got some tread, or not as much tread, on those tires. 28 years old. Vikings signed him to another 2-year deal, which Kwesi is and Rob Brzezinski are already mastering the structure of. They are wearing the heck out of the void years. They're being really creative with, signing bonuses, workout bonuses, and low guarantees, low cap hits in this first year. So Dean Lowry comes in, I assume, as a bigger, better Jonathan Bullard as the 5 tech, not an outside linebacker, probably hand in the ground. He'll give you a little bit of pass rushing, give you a little bit of run stopping, and do all of it solidly, but not at a Pro Bowl or spectacular level. Have I evaluated Dean Lowry to your standards, Arif?
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. I mean, what's interesting is seeing Packers fans kind of react to all of this. I mean, some of it is just like, oh my God, the Vikings have signed another former Packer, which is like, I look at another division and see those transactions, right? In division signings happen like all the time. But like the Packers weren't complaining when they signed a Bear safety, right? Like this just happens, right? But the thing that's kind of interesting is you take a look back on how Packers fans and Packers analysts have evaluated Dean Lowry, and they were really high on him at the end of 2021, much more than I was. I thought that their enthusiasm was a little bit much. And then at the end of 2022, they were really, really low on him without an understanding at that point that he was going to be on another team. They just thought, he was turning into a liability, that his power wasn't there, that he's getting blown up in the run game a little bit too much. And I'm wondering if some of that is conditioned by the fact that they had set really high standards for him and he failed to meet them. And some of it's conditioned by a genuine drop off in play. Either way, I'm really curious about the reasoning behind why his play maybe dropped off a little bit in 2022, which means, of course, that, if you're Vikings fans, it means you're buying the dip. And if you're Packers fans, it means that the Vikings are buying a poisoned asset, right? And so that I'm really curious about kind of what the issue is there. But I think on the whole, evaluating his last 3 years of play, I think that your analysis is correct, that he is a solid, well above the level of a rotational player, well below the level of like an impact starter, but somebody you're really comfortable with starting and someone you're extremely comfortable with rotating in. I think is probably, and I think, from the perspective of projecting role, I think Jonathan Bullard plus is correct. I think in terms of like comparing skill sets and styles or whatever, that's probably off. But I think in terms of what he would do for the Vikings, I think that's probably correct.
Mm-hmm. I will never forget Dean Lowry, like just cracking the code of the Kirk Cousins bootleg. And
back in 2020, right? Both of those games were disastrous.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was 2020. Like
might be 2019.
The 2019 Monday night game where Za'Darius Smith got all his sacks.
Because then after that, San Francisco used that as a template. I remember that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was
Green Bay did it week 2 that year.
Yeah.
And nobody else did until Green Bay did it again week 16. Nobody else watched that tape, I guess.
Yeah. Well, didn't he just stand out there in like a wide 9 and just wait for him? And they let Dalvin Cook run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And
they did not attack Dalvin Cook from the backside. Yeah.
And they just took away every rollout. And it seemed like Kirk Cousins, like slowly that kind of blueprint got out there. And the rollouts have gotten a little less effective in recent years. But Dean Lowry, Luke, Braun, your take.
Yeah, pretty similar spot. I think he's kind of just a dude, and that's okay. He's making just a dude money. So I feel really neutral about it. It feels like they purchased an asset for what that asset costs. And I don't I see people calling him a Dalvin Tomlinson replacement. I think that expects far too much of him. And I still think that defensive tackle is a need. I think the Vikings, I would love for them to get one more inarguably kind of every down starting quality guy up there. I think Harrison Phillips, Kyrie's Tonga, and Dean Lowry isn't quite good enough. I want one more body to sort of either create a rotation, create a competition. But the acquisition of Dean Lowry is not something that really moves the needle for me either way. It's fine.
So let's go piece by piece on the defense and look at the exchanges that have been made. I don't know, like you said, I don't know if saying that Tomlinson and Lowry are a direct exchange. Maybe it's more Lowry for Bullard, but you have lost Tomlinson.
I think so. Yeah. So you still need to replace him.
Yeah. So you are in that sense, you have probably gotten worse. Peterson for Murphy. Is that a better or worse exchange? I would venture to say you think it's better. I don't know.
So my take on this is that the role that Peterson was asked to play, he'll play better than the role Murphy will be asked to play. But the role Murphy will be asked to play is far more valuable. So the defense will be better. Our evaluation of how Murphy is playing will probably be worse than Peterson's level of play. But he was just asked to do a lot less. He did it really well, but he was asked to do a lot less, and it limited your opportunities elsewhere just because of the things that you kind of focused Peterson in on.
Well stated. And Luke Braun, you're fired up about Byron Murphy. I'm guessing that's an improvement for you.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think he can actually be a corner that shadows someone, and you could never ask Patrick Peterson to do that. Like, kind of famously, that's what went wrong for him. And
I don't know if I want Murphy shadowing anyone, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, if he can kind of reclaim what he was doing at the beginning of 2022, that is what he was doing.
Yeah.
And it was super dope. But with the corner room in general is still like, you've lost Chandon Sullivan, you've lost Duke Shelley, you haven't replaced them. Are we assuming replacement players are coming for them, or are we saying like we got to play a game tomorrow?
Right. Yeah. It's a good question.
Duke Shelley's still on the market, right? Yeah. I didn't miss anything. Okay.
No. He didn't sign with anybody. It's just right now he's not on the roster, so we're projecting essentially he's not in the room, right?
Yeah. That's fair.
Or are we projecting as sort of, we get a whoever and call
right? Like if we fill out the cornerback room with a bunch of replacement level players, is the defense better or worse? Or are we projecting, like, say, a draft pick there, right?
Well, let's put names to it. Dantzler and Shelley out, Evans and Booth in. I think that's worse.
Because they were there before.
Worse. Yeah, that sucks. Not they suck. I mean, they could use some work, but that question sucks. Not, again, Sam, not an insult to you. It's difficult to untangle all of the elements of this question because we're supposed to project, improvement for rookies. I did like what I saw from Evans in a very small sample, and it was more I liked what that projects to than I liked his level of performance, right? I like how he played and what that should look like going forward. But again, small sample. So is the defense better? Probably not, but it's not like Dantzler was killing it. And I don't want to be overconfident with the really high level of play that Duke Shelley, put together, because I've seen, small sample cornerbacks do really well and then fall off, especially with the size speed profile that Duke Shelley has. So would the defense be better next year if it was Duke Shelley and Cameron Dantzler starting next year instead of a Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth starting next year? Probably not. But compared to how they played last year versus how I project this group to play next year, also probably not, if that makes sense.
Unquestionably, the best exchange that's been made here was Donatel for Flores. And with Flores, they're hoping that framework can yield maximum results out of players that most of them are projecting. Like Murphy is a projection. Asamoah is a projection. Booth and Evans are projections. Someone like Lowry, that I think that's more so what you're going to get. Like Kendricks for Asamoah, that's certainly a worse team on paper based on priors, but Asamoah projecting forward, I think you like that exchange, especially when you take into account money, but it probably makes them a worse team on paper next year, potentially.
Yeah, and it I guess depends on how you feel about specifically the 2022 version of Kendricks, because our opinion of Kendricks has a lot of priors going into it, and 2022 probably doesn't influence that opinion as much. I don't think it should. But if you're just taking 2022, that's a worse asset, but I still think you're getting worse by cutting him and not replacing him by anybody but the rookie who was already on the roster.
This is a stupid question. Was Kendricks green dot last year?
Yeah.
So who's green dot now? Hicks?
Might be Asamoah.
I would imagine it's Hicks.
I'm guessing Hicks.
Yeah.
Take it off the rookie's plate or the second year guy's plate, probably. Yeah. That's probably the thought process behind it. So I feel like, in summary, there is a very pessimistic viewpoint that if you want to be glass half empty, you can look at this restructured defense and say, well, they got worse here, they got worse here, they got worse here. The improvement is all theoretical. And I think this is where you have to put so much faith in the Brian Flores scheme, that this is all going to work with a big schematic shift, because I don't know if the apples to apples replacements are necessarily in themselves all home runs. I think they have to fit within this Flores puzzle.
Yeah.
It's also incomplete. You know, they don't have to play a game tomorrow. Draft's still coming. They can still grab another corner if they wanted to. So that's also something to consider. It might be worse on the whole right now, but we wouldn't expect it to be a completed thought a week into free agency.
FanDuel brings us today's show. They're America's #1 sports book. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Safe, secure, super easy to use. March Madness yielded so many interesting beats over the weekend. NBA coming down the stretch, as well as NHL, and even those XFL wagers that we parlay on every week. Same game parlays give you a chance at big payouts, and you get paid instantly after you win. Also, get that no sweat first bet. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon for up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if that first bet doesn't win. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more. All right, still plenty to come here on the Minnesota Football Party. Hey, comment down below. Is the Vikings defense better or worse than when the season ended? Let us know. Locked On Sports Minnesota, subscribe to the page and comment. Adam Thielen has a home. He lands in Carolina, reported 3-year, $25 million deal, which, guys, I think it fits the valuation that we laid out on this show. He's about an $8 million per year guy. Third year of that deal, he may not see. And he goes now to play with a rookie quarterback, #1 overall pick, and Terrace Marshall and Laviska Shenault. Adam Thielen. What's he going to do in Carolina, Arif Hasan?
He's going to be the immediate wide receiver 1. That is rough. So, I mean, Carolina does have, in addition to, obviously, they're going to spend the top pick or some combination of the top pick on a quarterback. And by some combination, they could like trade down. They'll still spend that on a quarterback, but they do have a second-round pick, because the second-round pick that they traded away was San Francisco's. And so they do have a second-round pick. That is probably going to be on a receiver. But if you take a look at the receivers projected to go near the top of the second round, a lot of them are slot types, almost all of them. Your Zay Joneses, Xavier Hutchinsons, Jalen Hyatts, Josh Downses, all of those. People that I think would be pretty excellent in Minnesota, right? But in a Carolina passing offense, there's not a big body, right? Your biggest body might be Laviska Shenault, because he's like pretty big for the kind of player he is. It might be Adam Thielen. So that is going to be a roster that right now is going to be probably a couple of wide receiver 2s. Now, Adam Thielen has played the primary receiver role, unlike a lot of these guys. He knows what that looks like. He knows how to play it. The question is whether or not he continues to have like enough in the gas tank for that to be kind of his role, right? And it's not like they can offload this on a really high value receiving running back. First, because that's just generally a fantasy. You don't have a running back that good at catching the ball. Otherwise, they'd be a pass catcher. And they don't have a tight end, right? That has that capability. So he is going to, bear the burden in that Carolina offense in a big way, even after the draft, probably, again, depending on how the draft shakes out. So I'm optimistic for what this means in terms of his numbers. I'm not optimistic for what this team's in terms of Carolina, not because I don't think Adam Thielen doesn't have a lot to offer another team. Again, I thought that he actually played pretty well in Minnesota. But I just don't see Carolina getting substantially, better as a result of this. If they already had a really high level receiver, say, I don't know, like a DJ Moore type, then
Pick name out of thin air there.
Yeah, just picking a name. Yeah. I think that the Adam Thielen $8 million a deal, $8 million a year deal would have more value for Carolina, right? It's not just a linear, you add this much value to the team. I think that the complementary, I guess I hate using this word, but it's actually the appropriate word to use here, synergy of having a complementary receiver adds more value than having that guy as your primary receiver does.
Well stated. He could be a productive player, but also I think there's the risk too of just the growing pains of a rookie first-year quarterback who's not guaranteed to be great right away. Adam Thielen is accustomed to I think he's a very timing-centric receiver. He's accustomed to quarterbacks knowing where he's going to be. He's had the same one for 5 years. There's a lot of timing involved in the way that he catches passes.
I get what you're saying. He had a great year with Case Keenum first, and that was definitely not that. But also, he does improvise a lot more than I think a lot of receivers in West Coast systems tend to do, and he expects Kirk Cousins to kind of keep up. And it was more they had a really good level of communication and chemistry than I think it is the specificity of their timing. I will say, if you ask Adam Thielen to run a route and get to the spot at the right time, he will do that, right? He's very good in timing-oriented offenses. But I do think that he was a very careful freelancer, right? He was cautious is probably not the right word, but deliberate might be, because he was willing to freelance and throw off the timing of a play if he thought it was going to help. And he talked about this a little bit on some, when they do like the player spotlights on film breakdowns and stuff like that. He does talk about this a little bit. Like, I took a little bit extra time on this release, knowing I'm going to be half a second late to get to my spot, because I know I'm also going to be a yard more open, and that's going to be more helpful. So I will say he knows how to operate outside of a timing offense. We saw that with Case Keenum. He knows how to break a timing offense. We saw that with Kirk Cousins. But if you do ask him to run like a very specific timing offense, he'll run it really well.
Braun?
Part of the reason that Case Keenum offense worked too is because both Diggs and Thielen were really big inaccuracy erasers.
Yes.
That they had good bodies, good catch radiuses. And so, like,
I think it's radii.
Catch radii.
I'm coming off of you in math class? Come on.
Well, not English class. But you could miss by a little bit, and those guys would go up and get it, which I just think about, Anthony Richardson. Isn't that kind of the deal here?
Yeah, exactly.
I think
he had the
opposite.
In Florida, he had the opposite of inaccuracy erasers, right? He had accuracy erasers. Like, some of those passes were perfect, and the receiver's like,
oh God.
What do you want me to do with this? Catch the ball? Get out of here.
So it's like, well, if the Panthers wanted to chase a higher ceiling, I guess that helps.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Something. But no, I think Thielen bet on himself a little bit, and I think it paid off. I don't think he was going to get a contract like this from Minnesota when all was said and done, if he decided he was going to go through with whatever they renegotiated to. And so, good for him. And he certainly wouldn't get the market share here because of Justin Jefferson. So I think this works out for Adam Thielen very well. Yeah, exactly. So I think it works out for Thielen specifically very well. But kind of alluding to what Arif was talking about, this might be more of a, hey, Adam Thielen might be a decent fantasy pick, but I don't know if the Panthers will be good.
One could see a scenario too where the Panthers do find a wide receiver pretty highly in the draft, and then Adam Thielen is asked to be the mentor to him that he was to Justin Jefferson. And that was an easier sell with JJ because he was coming from a position of strength. Diggs was gone. He was the top dog. No one knew Justin Jefferson was a Hall of Fame talent. And now Thielen, already feeling like he was sort of spurned by Minnesota, may ask to be in that position again and watch somebody ascend past him on the depth chart that the team has a lot more invested in. These are the things that happen when you're in your 30s and you're toward the end of your career. Like, unsavory things happen. So my best to him. I hope that he fends off those young receivers and does well for them for a couple of years here. But it is hard for me to see like this being a long, happy, flourishing marriage with Thielen and the Panthers where there's wins and he's the new star. I think he'll be a piece to that
Okay,
puzzle.
so if Thielen somehow makes Laviska Shenault like a good receiver, right? He takes Laviska under his wing, and Laviska actually becomes a good receiver. If he brings along a rookie, and he helped bring along Justin Jefferson, you got to make him a wide receivers coach after he retires.
Oh my God, yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
And didn't Diggs take a lot of stuff from him, or they kind of learned a bunch of stuff
They
together?
learned from
like,
each other.
They were
Yeah.
pals. I think they still are pals. Yeah.
They still
yeah.
are, but they do have very different route running styles. And so it's like, like the skill set they have is very similar, and the way that they express the skill set is very different. So it's like really difficult to figure out what they took from each other, but they might have, right? Like it's, even if Diggs like runs a route in an exaggerated way, a lot different than Thielen runs it in a subtle way, there are a lot of things that they might be able to take from each other, like how they run a comeback. They're like, we both agree that you got to have your shoulders over your knees when you're running a comeback because it looks like or something, right? So it's possible, right? But they don't look like they play like each other.
I do feel like there's more emphasis on like the art of route running, like in social media, people posting the all-22s more often. Look at this route. Oh, nasty. He broke his ankles. Oh, destroyed.
Like 90% of those posts are whip outs.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that it's
The
like
Chad Beebe route.
It's very cool to be a good route runner now. And I think these guys like kind of eat that up. They want to learn from the best. They want to figure out how to be that next guy who sends a quarterback down to the ground. I would not be surprised if Thielen passes off some of his intel to the next young Panthers receivers. Before we move on, I want to talk about this Lamar Jackson rumor a little bit to the Vikings. I'm going to tell you about Built Bar. You can still go to BuiltMarchMadness.com. Vote for your favorite Built Bars or Built Puffs, cookies and cream. My personal favorite, you can vote for that bar too, or whatever you want. Support your team, support your Puff, support your Built Bar, and become one of the 50 lucky Locked On listeners to get a free box of Built. One Locked On fan wins a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered straight to your door. Got to try Built, best protein bar ever with high protein, low sugar, and 100% real chocolate, and also a cadre of delicious, delectable flavors. Did I mention real chocolate? Yeah, 100%. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day for the rest of March. Hop in and support your pick. So this is the quote from, I closed out the tab. Why do I do that?
The Jeremy Fowler quote?
Jeremy Fowler quote. Now, this does not sound like a report, colon. This is not a source, colon. This is Jeremy Fowler just dropping this in. Was it NFL Live or another ESPN show saying
Sports Center?
Sports Center. I talked to an executive in the league about landing spots for Lamar Jackson, and they think that the Vikings could be a dark horse candidate as Kirk Cousins is in the final year of his contract, and they might look to reshape their identity. So it doesn't sound like it's coming from a source. It sounds like it's coming from someone who just
is speculating on what they think is a good fit,
the landscape of the league, and is speculating. I don't personally see it, but are there some legs to this?
We would not be talking about this if it wasn't for bad Twitter aggregators. People who I'm right. You know I'm
You're 100% right.
yeah, right. Like people whose sole a job is maybe a strong word here, but sole like reason for being, right, is to
their purpose
aggregate.
online.
Yeah, exactly. To aggregate online content, put it on their own Twitter feed. And more often they're like correctly sourcing things, which is better than it was like 3-4 years ago when they were just reporting it as if they were reporting it. But pairing it with like graphics and edits to make it seem more likely, it's a bad use of Twitter. And someone very recently got dragged for it. I think they probably should experience a little bit less of the harassment that they've received for it. But just generally speaking, there has been a backlash against these kinds of accounts because they are fundamentally misreporting without actually kind of misreporting in the same way, because the sentences they use are not inaccurate, but the way that they frame it, the way that they bring it across makes it seem much more solid than what was originally reported. We wouldn't be like, it's just some guy asked a league executive, which is not a nothing ask, right? It's not like you're asking somebody on the street. Like a league executive in theory would know, like you said, Sam, the landscape of the league, what's going to make sense. They're taking into account, based on the quote, taking into account things like time horizons, right? When they'll have to move on from Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee or Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, taking into all of that account when they speculate. But they are speculating, right? There's no report. And so we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't for these kinds of Twitter accounts. That's my take.
Let me also complain too about sort of the article structure on today's web. If it's not a subscription website, obviously it's ad-based, it's click-based. And they've now discovered,
which
and you
we
find
can
this
love, by the way. Those can be good, Sam.
Yeah, not all bad at all. I'm sure, Arif, you abide by still a semblance of the upside down pyramid or the reverse pyramid style of journalism. No, you do.
No, you're like a semblance of journalistic integrity. I was like, semblance, Sam. No, I understand. No. Yeah, my writing structure is not quite the upside
wholeheartedly.
Down.
But now the aggregators have gone to the pyramid, where they give you the crumbs at the beginning and the meat at the bottom, so you have to scroll and get the ads. So an article might say, there was an explosive report that links the Lamar Jackson to the Minnesota Vikings. First, let me tell you who Lamar Jackson is. Lamar Jackson went to Louisville and then was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens.
We need you to stay on our page for more than 45 seconds.
That's exactly how these are written.
God.
Yeah.
Yep. So Luke Braun, safe to say we can expect some photoshops of Lamar Jackson
already seen him
in purple.
Oh,
it wouldn't be that hard
for you.
Yeah, how do you get Lamar Jackson in purple? That's crazy.
No, people have been doing that since the draft,
right?
Yeah,
right. So with Kirk's restructure, that pretty much precludes this for this year, right? Because if they were gonna get Lamar Jackson, that probably would mean that they're looking to find a way to trade Kirk Cousins, get him to waive the no trade or whatever. That big restructure makes that
more difficult,
maybe even impossible. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, that's not.
They
but
like what, 2 void years, right? So if they, I'm just taking
and converted a bunch of signing bonus, which then would come right back on the books,
right? It just So if the Vikings traded Kirk Cousins right now, I'm taking a look at the over the cap calculator, which does include the 2 additional void years and the conversion of roster bonus into signing bonus. The Vikings would take on an additional $18.5 million in dead cap. So the net, I should say, not dead cap, in cap space. The net cap space is negative 18.5 in a trade.
Yep. Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Rip to that idea.
Yeah, nope. But next year, hey, look, Lamar Jackson.
When the Ravens tag him again.
If he plays on that tag, maybe they don't want to tag him again. Maybe the year goes belly up because he's really upset at the organization, and that is a recipe for failure as a team. Maybe things go belly up. Maybe they don't tag him again. Maybe he hits the market a little better. Maybe they non-exclusive tag him again, and we can have this same conversation, but this time without a quarterback on the books.
Right. So when Kirk Cousins was tagged twice in a row, first it was a non-exclusive tag, and then it was the exclusive tag. So that's something to keep in mind. It's possible that the Ravens do that.
So contract-wise, if Kirk Cousins was dealt, dead cap for next year, the $28 million, does that stay on the Vikings books next year?
Okay. It hits us this year instead of next year.
This year. Yeah. So, because that all accelerates into the year that they're traded. If he's traded after June 1st, it does create a net cap savings over the next 2 years. It would be a net gain of $10 million in cap space this year, which is probably not enough to accommodate a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. Unless the structure is crazy.
And then next year stays the same, right?
And the next year, it's like 18 point. Well, no, it's
still 28.5.
I think it's less 10. So the net savings is 18.25.
Okay, I have another cap question. If you guys are willing to indulge me, Jamar Jefferson. Who is that? Justin Jefferson's extension.
Jamar Jefferson is a player.
I think he is.
Yeah.
Was he a former Viking?
No, he's a Lions running back. Okay, I was right.
Oh, okay, nice. So can they introduce that extension and add $0 to the cap this year, or would the signing bonus proration start this year, or can they delay that?
Well, they technically don't need to have a signing bonus, but that would be what it would take, and that's probably not the case.
I don't think they can manipulate this year's cap number with an extension. I don't.
Well, they would add to it if they gave him a signing bonus.
Well, I'm saying because it's very low right now. I'm saying, can they avoid adding to it?
Oh,
assuming that they need to extend.
Just don't do a signing bonus.
Okay,
but you have to get Justin Jefferson to agree.
You can do. So this actually happens fairly often with rookie contracts. You can do a signing bonus, and it doesn't hit you this year because it comes into effect the next year.
Oh, because it comes into effect like on the New Year's of the deal.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So yeah, you can extend. Yeah. You actually, it's near impossible to change this year's cap number. So yeah, you could do an extension without hurting this year's cap because it's hard to do anything to this year's cap for the Justin Jefferson contract.
And then TJ Hawkinson, that's the other domino. $9 million against the cap this year. I assume they'll try to keep that, under 10, certainly with an extension.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's doable. I don't think that needs to introduce new money.
Super doable. Yeah. I mean, they'll have to extend him. In that case, it would introduce new money. But yeah, super doable.
Cool. Ezra Cleveland, is he a sneaky extension candidate, or is this just to play out the deal situation? I'm just going down the line.
Play out the last year, and then we talk about it next February.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't.
So.
I don't think you're doing it now, but you could. I could see it next February, but I think we see one more year before we decide.
Yeah, it wouldn't bother me if they did it now. I think that he's played well.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. Well, and this is his contract year, right? So if he plays well, he's probably hitting the market. Probably, I would guess.
Or you're negotiating under those in that environment, which might make him a little more expensive. But hey, if he plays great this year, you might be all right with that.
Yeah. I want to tell folks, Luke Inman's on today's show. I just want to promote his newsletter because Luke Inman is hard at work on the NFL Draft Buzz newsletter, which you can subscribe to at lockedonpodcast.com/newsletters. Get the bigged stories in the NFL draft cycle. He's talking combine. He's got rankings. Luke Inman's NFL Draft Buzz newsletter, lockedonpodcast.com/newsletters. Let's wind down with one of these.
It's time to tell you who spilled their proverbial drink on the sofa. Get ready for this week's party foul.
All right, I'm doing mine first. My party foul is on me for not anticipating that the hotel would not honor the loose agreement that I had asked for last night, that they extend my sign-out time. We are recording this early because I have to check out local time here, noon. Normal checkout time, if people aren't familiar, is typically 11. And the guy last night said 1 is probably doable. And, he gave me enough language in there that I should have anticipated that a little bit better.
He said it in that way, you have every reason to be.
So that party foul is on me for forcing this podcast to record earlier than it needed to be.
Luke Braun.
I've never had a problem with that. That's actually kind of I've party foul in the hotel. That feels like a pretty easy thing usually.
Yeah, but it's look, I'm not going to tell you which hotel I'm staying at. If you're like really dedicated, you could probably take a look at the background and figure it out. I'm not expecting the world of this particular establishment.
Okay, fair enough. My party foul goes to FAU basketball player Elijah Martin, who at the end of their game against Fairleigh Dickinson goes for a celebratory. They had won the game. The clock was going out. He goes for a celebratory 360 dunk. Everybody's talking about how it's unclassy and unsportsmanlike. I actually don't care about going for the dunk. You're young. You're having the time of your life. You're winning a game in the March Madness.
At the tournament.
Go ham.
You're
have
one
a good
shining
time,
moment.
right? You got to make the dunk, dude. He whiffs
did he miss
the dunk.
the dunk?
It goes... Horribly, he missed the dunk. Dude, you got to make the dunk.
Do you know that costs the over? That's for some bettors.
Really? Oh,
That
that's why
costs the
everyone's so mad,
over.
huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's beautiful, actually.
Like, I mean, and you're probably lucky that they even attempted a shot, right? Like you assume
if you're an over better, you're lucky that they
goes in for the dunk.
Gravy.
And then missed.
That would have been a worse beat
okay.
than the TCU one.
Oh my goodness. That's so juicy.
That's so
you gotta make it, man. Hit the dunk.
You've got the. I'm surprised because you often have wrong takes, but you've got the correct take here. We should not be castigating the kid for attempting it. But the thing is, when you're there, you are cashing a check, right? Like it is a bigger risk to do something like that at the end of a game. I don't know, morally speaking. And now the check is bounced. You are now liable for a lot more than if you'd done nothing at all. So yeah, I agree that he magnified the stakes and failed to meet them.
He took a swing. I get it, but now you got to get clowned on. You missed the dunk.
That's it.
Arif, you've made it through 46 minutes of this recording, and you've yet to brag about where you stand in the pool. Do you know where you stand in the pool?
Yeah, I'm fourth, I think, in the Ron Johnson tournament, and I've got the highest maximum points available to me out of anybody.
You have your entire
Princeton.
Final Four intact.
I got my entire Final Four. I had a good chunk of my Elite Eight. Thanks, Purdue. But but I still
probably
have.
helps you though,
because it does. It does. Yeah, it helps me. Yeah. Which I think this is I think people think about brackets the wrong way, for sure.
Yeah.
I probably did this on the last show.
Oh, my bracket's buzzed, but everyone's bracket's busted. Pool, so
the only goal is to have the least busted bracket, right?
Yeah,
and so
correct.
If you don't have Purdue advancing to the championship game, or the Purdue losing is great for you, right? So I only
it's all about
right
Final
now.
Four retention, which you have done.
So I've got the maximum available points to me. I've got the fourth most points. This is not a great round for me right now in terms of points I'm scoring right now. But the teams that are losing are not teams I had in my Final Four and advancing very far. So it's fine. I could have used some different resolutions in the Tennessee's, Dukes, Louisiana's portion of that bracket. That one's pretty rough, but whatever. That part of the bracket is destroyed for me either way. Go Spartans.
Same. I actually have them in the Final Four as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I've also got I've got UCLA and Houston on the other
I've got Connecticut and Houston. So that's to me is the difference there.
You have Texas.
I have Texas. Oh yeah.
Texas.
Go Longhorns.
Houston. Yeah.
Longhorns, right? Yeah.
Within the same state. Luke Braun, not quite as rosy an outcome for you.
Am I in dead last?
56th of 64.
Yeah, not last.
That's Garrett Bradbury type stuff, huh?
Oh, it's so bad.
Luke Braun, you have exactly one Final Four team left and no finalists.
Who's his Final Four team? Is it Bama?
Houston.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Houston, Texas, I had Arizona in the Final Four. And I had Purdue and Kansas in the final. I got really owned by that. I also had Marquette in the Elite Eight and Virginia in the Elite Eight. They're out.
I respect the gamble to put Marquette there, but the rest.
A conscious thing I absolutely did on purpose, knowing it was risky. Yep.
Okay, so here's the thing, Sam. The reason I haven't bragged, and you know me, I am very braggadocious. I'm very proud of my successes and blind to my failures. Right? That's who I am. It's easy to be blind to your failures when you don't have very many, of course. But the reason I haven't been bragging about this is because I have no idea what's happening in college basketball. Remember, Luke, earlier this segment, Luke explained to me what happened in a critical game. And I was like, oh, did he miss?
There's a 16 seed playing in the round of 32. It was dope.
Yeah, that's crazy. He missed? Wild. Tell me more. Right? Like, I don't know what's going on. I picked teams based off of hey, man, when I was in high school, this team was pretty good. Right?
Yeah, UConn. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, UConn.
Hey,
right?
UCLA was really good for a lot. They got to go far.
Kevin Love.
Yeah, actually, UConn was a little bit different. I picked UConn to go pretty far because I saw a TikTok. So that one's a little bit different.
Okay.
I'll count that.
Well informed on that one. You did your research.
Yeah. Otherwise, the only reason I picked Princeton was because of Kwesi.
Wait, do you have that? Did you have them winning again? No. It's actually very unfortunate because you had Missouri in the Elite Eight and they drew a 15 seed and could have easily been in the Sweet 16 and then they lost.
Yeah. I should have trusted Kwesi's Tigers a little bit more.
Yeah, man.
And Ziggy Wilf's Fairleigh Dickinson Knights, right? Or was it the other Wilf? One of the Wilfs went to the school at the 16 seed.
Wow.
How are the Wilfs not funding that program a little better? They don't have a band. They don't have like a full-time media relations.
I saw the Dayton band showed up and they bought like Party City plastic swords. That rules. That's the most college basketball. I love that. That's great. That's the stuff that's good about the tournament.
My party foul is bad aggregators. And that is our show. Arif, you got to check out your hotel. Do you like make the bed as you leave? Or is it just like however you got out of it, you leave it?
Yeah, it's however I got out of it. This is not like it's their job sort of thing, but it like kind of is because here's the thing. They have to replace the sheets regardless. So they're going to have to make the bed. So I'm actually probably adding work if I make the bed. But also, I don't do anything. I just leave a tip. It's like, oh, I left the room a little bit extra messy. Well, here's a tip, right? Like it's yeah.
There you go. He knows his hotel etiquette. He's Arif Hasan at Arif Hasan NFL, Pro Football Network. Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings at Luke Braun NFL. Check him out on Twitter. I'm at Sam Ekstrom, and we'll be back tomorrow with Luke Inman talking draft and all the latest Minnesota Vikings news on the Minnesota Football Party on Locked On Sports Minnesota.